Sarah, it's good to see you. For people who don't know who you are, do you want to give a quick intro?
I am Sarah Floris. I currently work as a senior data and ML platform engineer at Swift. I've done data consulting. I mostly work at very small places. I have been starting to do a lot of writing. I started to do that a lot last year, and it's actually kind of how I got to know you because thinking about what I'm going to do in the future, and yeah, that's kind of what I'm doing. I mean, I
Awesome.
yeah.
And you go by the moniker of the Dutch engineer, which is pretty cool. So that's
Sorry.
awesome. Oh, I said, but you go by the moniker of the Dutch
Oh,
engineer as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
So
actually from the Netherlands. I will go ahead and explain this. I'm actually from the Netherlands, born and raised. I was 2005, give or take. I was moved to New Orleans. My dad works at an oil company, and they moved him over here to the States. But I'm still like 100% Dutch. I'm married to
cool.
to an American man that I met in undergraduate, and
Nice.
yeah. So
Very cool.
yeah,
That's awesome. You don't meet a lot of Dutch engineers, so when I do see one, that's pretty cool. Um, Yeah, and I think we could start off talking about content. I think that's how we got to know each other. Was you had your I think at the time a Substack. I think you moved it, which we can also talk about. But
yeah. So
yeah.
I originally had a. So actually, it's kind of funny that you say that. So I originally started in Medium. So Medium, I did that last
Mm,
year because I didn't believe that anybody was really going to be interested in what I had to say. Like I'm being straight up honest. I was just like, oh, I like to do these demo projects, and I wonder if someone else is interested too. And that's how I kind of got started. And then last year, I decided to make the move to Substack because that's where, Medium, you don't really own your audience, which I didn't really know
right.
what that meant until very recently, too. So, for those who don't know, it's where you own, like, basically you have a list of emails that you can talk to. So, in case you do change platforms like I did, you can just bring them over to the next platform. And so that's why I started doing Substack. Like, you did a start, I think, earlier this year. But there's a lot of tech individuals who are on Substack. And
Yeah.
I most recently, actually, like you said, changed to Beehive, which is a little different. The reason for that, so Substack, one of the things that I'm most annoyed with, and probably a lot of folks are annoyed with, is the API. There's no automation. And
Mm,
when you're trying to like send out everything to everywhere to make sure that your audience knows that you've, written stuff, or just like for the fact that you don't want to burn out, because I do have a 9 to 5. I really like my job at Swift. And I don't want to I don't want to burn out. I just want to write content and have or write what I like to write, and have others read it as well. And right now, like with Substack, that doesn't really happen. So
okay.
I've ended up finding, so I ended up finding Beehive, which does have an API. Unfortunately, there's not as many people on there, so the recommendations it's not as big. Adam is actually on there too. Adam, oh, um, he writes. Oh my gosh, I forgot the name of it. I feel really bad now.
What was?
Hypercube Consulting, I think, is his consulting company.
Oh,
Or
Adam
yeah,
Skorka, I think
yeah,
from the UK. Yeah, yeah. He's
yeah.
a
So
good dude.
he's on
Yeah.
there, and I think Marcus Ortiz, who does weekly data gigs,
Mm,
also recently switched over. But that's like kind of why I ended up switching over, because um, the automation is really important. I also do a lot of courses, and with that, like having those all three sync up together makes my life happy. So
oh, that's a good idea.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's Substack's an interesting one. Like I've been on it. I post a lot less frequently than I intended. But uh, it's interesting. I mean, I had Medium. I think I posted like maybe a sentence on there. Then I was like, I don't really like Medium at all. Then I had my own blog for ages, which is still up, but it's ancient, and I don't do it. I refer
No,
everyone to
no.
Substack. 'Cause Substack was, it's cool. I like the fact that it seems like there's a really big community of people on there, and the social recommendations is something that I think is really attractive. Um, I guess I haven't had to dive too much into it to explore whether or not I like the automation, or I
Yeah.
suppose lack thereof. They do have notes now, so it's like Twitter.
Well,
So
that's the thing I was gonna say too. So is that a good thing or a bad thing, right? So
no
like with
idea.
me, I struggle. I mean, we probably all do, but I specifically struggle with having so much information thrown at me through Twitter, through LinkedIn, through and like trying to sift through the stuff through what I want to actually read. And unfortunately, a lot of the newsletters that do get written like are not as like information based,
Mm,
if that makes sense. Like there's a lot of like um I guess for lack of a better word, it's like fluff. It just like it ends up repeating itself, and there's nothing really that like makes one different from the others. So in one way, it could potentially be good, or like it could potentially be bad because you do have like now a whole repetition of like hey look at me and see the content duplication, but at the same time, I think it could also be really good because then you're with the Twitter stuff like getting more better of the information out there that is not as fluffed up with the rest. I don't know. I'm still like so it's a nice feature and I'm frustrated with it because the API is something that like as a developer for developers if you're trying to attract tech folks it
mm.
just kind of makes sense but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, yeah, it's an interesting one. Like I think for the book that I'm writing, I'm gonna actually launch most of it on Substack, at least to
Oh
get early releases on it. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm taking a book from Steven Sinofsky actually. So he wrote I think it was Hardcore Software or something like that, which kind of
yeah,
went through his whole experience working at Microsoft, on various key projects back in the day, and interactions with people like Bill Gates and Ballmer and everybody else. And so
right.
he was. I think it was a really cool template to write a book. I feel like these days, we can talk more about this, but publishing is one of these things where I'm keen on building an audience around the idea of what the book is about, and
Yeah.
and trying to refine the idea as it comes along. As you write a book, especially your first couple iterations on a chapter, it's just going to be complete crap, and the idea is probably not going to land. So you really, I find like having, uh, you know, getting your ideas out there is important. And Substack seems as good of as any place right
Yeah.
now. Plus, you can monetize the audience and have them maybe approach
Yeah.
the book from the
And so
different
that's the
tiers.
other
So
right, and that's the other thing that I think about a lot too, right? Like how where when do you start monetizing things and when do you like
mm,
so with Beehive specifically something that I really like is their referral program, which is basically like I don't really have to sell anything, but you can get 10% off with my courses, for example, if you get people to subscribe, right? And so it's like an initiative that's not directly like, hey, come and pay for my newsletter, right? But
yeah,
like, it still helps them like, oh yeah, like and I think that courses like I really like the courses just because like that there's a lot of courses out there that are very video based and this is something that I get frustrated with a lot, and I am not a video person at all.
mm,
Don't send me anything from Udemy or Coursera or like I've tried so many times. Like after like 2 or 3 minutes, I'm like, okay, where what was the point, right? Like what am
right.
I supposed to learn here? And that's a lot what my courses are like. They're the snippets that you'll want to know, that you need to know, and then you can move on with your life, right? Like it's that's kind of the intent. So there's a lot of like exercises in there and there's a lot of um I make it pretty interactive even though it is reading most of it is reading based. And
Mhm.
eventually I might want to add like a video here or there, but it's not gonna be um the main attraction. And also like I just love to write. Like I don't know. I have a problem with it maybe. Like I
Well,
was really thinking about this, like maybe 60 articles in the last year. Like that is,
that's good.
if you like, well, that was just in 2022, right?
Yeah.
And so like I started writing at the beginning of that year, and that's a lot. Like
Yeah,
think about it, like
more than
writing.
one a week. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so I'm really good at that, and
The articles are great, and then I read them, I like them, and I think it's. But okay, so writing is interesting. I feel like writing is the one medium where it forces you to really think through the subject matter, in a way that is just I haven't found a substitute for it. I've done videos, made slides and all this other stuff, and it just isn't comparable to the art and the act of writing something out. It just again, it forces you to really think through what you're trying to say, versus making a video or even a podcast, right? Like I don't even know how many podcasts I've done, hundreds, maybe more, and it's easy. You just hit the mic and start blabbing, right? Videos. The hard part about video is editing, actually, right? So
and so
that's
I've been
mhm.
told, because I've asked, like, I've asked you too as well about like whether you would want to do podcasts or whether you would want to do videos, and
Yeah.
the commonality I've gotten, or like the theme that I've gotten, is like, you spend so much time editing video, and Zach Wilson just recently like went full on entrepreneur, and he was like, I didn't start making videos until I left, because it just takes a lot of time just
Oh,
sitting
it
there
takes a lot of time.
and making them and thinking them out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Because talking
And
with
I mean, so
Kenji
I
about this.
recently started a
Oh,
podcast. Yeah.
oh, you did? Oh, nice. That's cool. To talk about that. Yeah,
Yeah,
podcast.
and
Sick.
yeah, you're gonna be on it, right? No,
Oh yeah, well I'll be on it. Yeah, I'll be on it. But just one thing on the
um,
note of the on podcasting.
yeah.
I was talking to Kenji just earlier this week,
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah,
he was talking about how he actually likes podcasting more these days than doing a YouTube video, just because it's so much work to edit.
yeah.
It's a full time job, whereas podcasting you get to have great conversations and learn a lot, and not a lot of
And
editing
that's
involved. So
and that's what I like about it too. I mean, one of the things that inspired me to start, right, is like there's a lot of stories out there that are not being told, and I mean, even like, like people that everyone knows in this field, but even like not as popular folks, like, there's even myself, like I'm not technically, I don't even know what my status is. I don't really care about my status that much either, but like, the story of, for example, women coming into the field and how they're
right,
like, like, quote unquote surviving, right? Like they're not, it's difficult, and not just like even for women, it's all sorts of the minorities, I suppose I should say, that there's a lot of stories out there that are not being told, and I know I have a lot more
yeah,
to say even than I can write, because writing, like you said, it's a very active thing to write, versus when you're talking, which is very passive. But that's really what my podcast is going to be about, is like people's stories,
it's cool.
and then also just like what are the questions that people have that we could answer. So some of them will have people, and some of them, like, people will come on the podcast, and some of them will just be me basically talking about what the questions are that people
Yeah,
are asking. Like the most recent one, well, so one of the ones I'm going to be talking about pretty soon here is going to be about like the interaction between data science and data engineering, which is one of the latest articles I wrote too. Is actually one of the more popular articles that I've seen, like, for my blog. I've seen read, right? And so like now I was thinking about, I was like, how can I expand upon that, just because like people seem to be, that's a question that I get a lot. I mean, I imagine you get a lot too, as being the recovering the recovering data scientist, right?
yeah, yeah. I joked I'm going to become a recovering prompt engineer. So, uh,
Don't even
so
get me started with that one. That's a whole
but
different.
yeah, no.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But it's just like that kind of, like, what are the stories? I mean, you even have a different story than I do. Like, I did data science too, and then was like, well, we're all gonna need infrastructure anyway, so why not start with
Yeah,
infrastructure, right? And
yeah. That's. I mean, it seems like it's a never-ending topic, right? I think it's sort of the
yeah,
data engineers, data scientists, and then data engineers, software engineers, and I think with the other one would be software engineers, data science. So kind of all those play
Yeah.
together. But data engineering sort of sits in the middle of everything, and so I think that that's always been the kind of the source of endless nuances in conversation. So
Yeah.
and I guess ML engineers now and data engineers, like that's the thing. So there was an article that came out earlier this week or was it last week that talked about how ML engineering is just 98% data engineering or something like that.
Oh my gosh, don't
Across,
even no. So recently I actually just switched over to an ML engineering team and I'm reading a book. I don't know if you know Ben Wilson. It's actually by
yeah,
him.
I know Ben. Yeah, it's a good dude.
Yeah, and his book Machine Learning Engineering in Action. Excellent read. I highly recommend it. One of the books I'm going to read end to end, probably a few more times. Because like one of my new at Swift, one of the new things I'm doing is like building out a machine learning platform. And like trying to get better understanding what that actually means and
Mm.
what ML engineering means and how that differs between data engineering. And the more I'm getting into this, the more I'm realizing that machine learning engineering is totally like there's a total different world in there than just what data engineering is. But data engineering is like a very big part too of a machine learning engineer, but it's not like
Yeah,
98%. Like that is way off. And it's
yeah,
also a lot of just like management of folks, like trying to get. I mean, that's what data science and the rest of the other positions are too. Like trying to figure out what the like projects are, the ones that you should focus on, the ones you should like not necessarily should focus on, but what is going to be beneficial for both, like as a as the business as a whole, but as also as the data organization, right?
yeah,
Um, and that's also one of the voices that don't get really. It's also one of the voices that often gets ignored. Is like the individual contributor, right, versus the like the head of data. You'll see a lot of folks who are like head of data and CEO talking about what data teams should do, and it's very hard to talk about that when you're also kind of ignoring the individual contributors and how what the work that they're actually doing. They're on the ground, right? And um, yeah, no, it's not 98%. When I saw that, I was it was
Oh, he saw the article. Yeah, I think he had some good points. I think there's overlapping functionality that if you kind of get down into the
yeah, I
brain of it,
agree.
it's kind of
Mhm.
it's very very similar. But I think there's enough nuance where it it depends on where you work. But the machine
Okay.
learning engineering is there's enough of a difference. I would say that it is different. I mean, I'm giving actually a talk in Germany later this month. Recording this in mid-April right now. So, and it's basically about the data engineering lifecycle, which is the idea that we came up with in
Yeah.
our book Fundamentals of Data Engineering. But it was, but how does that influence machine learning and ML
Yeah.
ops and ML engineering, right? But as we point out, I think ML engineers are more the recipient of the data that data engineers would provide
Yeah.
them. And then you can kind of take it but ML engineering almost has its own life cycle to a large
But
extent.
there is that 50% at the beginning where you're so like I'm a huge advocate of what like the I guess the buzzword would be data centric ML, right? Where it's not necessarily like if you just throw stuff at the wall, it's not going to stick. You have to be much more active about it. You also have to make sure that the like it also means that as an ML engineer, you're the owner of those specific features, right? And those
Yeah,
specific data sources, but there's also like it separates out the data engineering responsibility more focusing on like okay data cleaning data making sure that it's in the spot easily accessible for the ML engineers or for the data scientists, right? But then there's also an idea of there as a ML engineer you still have to pull that data and you still
yeah,
have to transform it in a way that makes sense to the data scientists. But then you also have to think about like something that this book really highlights is like when you're talking about like online referencing versus batch, right? Batch jobs and batch jobs are you just it's essentially what most data pipelines do that are not streaming, right? And then online referencing is sorry inferencing.
yeah. Inferencing. I was like,
Inferencing
what are you talking about? But yeah,
is
um,
is like what would be equivalent of streaming in data.
Yeah.
pipelines. And so there's like a lot of concepts that like definitely my data engineering background will help me in this,
Mhm.
the next things that I'm in this new team. But there's, I mean, so you have to think about databases a lot. Like, what database do I use? Why do I use them? And then, of course, like we're all here to get better at software engineering. Like,
Yeah.
we're not software developers. Like, whether you're data engineer or ML, like that's the truth. But you still need to have solid skills, right? We can't just build some infrastructure and then hope that it just hope and pray.
It's certain I mean,
That it doesn't fall apart.
it's gotten easier, I would say, in the sense where there's a lot of tools that you could, sort of, stitch together,
Right,
and they sort of work. But at the end of the day, like, you're very likely still gonna be writing code and, writing
right,
software for, like, those things that are a core competency for you, and it certainly helps to be able to do that. I would say you're definitely, an extreme handicap if you don't have that ability.
yeah,
So,
exactly.
mhm. Yeah, it's
I mean,
interesting, and it
but it's not something that you can't learn. Like that's the difference. Like that's also something that I have noticed. So I've done a lot of like one team or two team data teaming, right? So where it's like just me or one other person. And the best way for me to have improved in those like roles specifically is being best friends with the software engineers. Because like whenever you're stuck, whenever it's usually you're stuck because something isn't working right within the system, and engineers are really good at picking those up, right?
Yep.
Like they're really good at identifying, oh, this is actually what's going on. So like like it's never going to hurt you in your career to not have those skills and be able to grow in that arena. I feel
Oh
like.
yeah, no, I always equate it to, if you're in construction, for example, right? Like just knowing how to build things is, I mean, at the end of the day, that's what you're doing as for a profession. But knowing how to swing a hammer, cut wood, put it all together, like it's a good skill to have. If you
So
if you
like
don't have those skills, it's kind of really hard to build things. So,
in
um,
those in that same analogy, like imagine building a house, right? But you only know how to build like not like you know how to build the foundation, but you don't know how to build anything else. You have the tools. You can put
yeah,
there's wood, right? But how do I put this together, right?
yeah. And if you want to call it, I mean, and obviously there's people that specialize. There's concrete people that all they do is concrete,
Right.
and but you got if you're gonna kind of oversee the entire system, maybe if you're architecting it or kind of seeing things end to end, it's more like being a general contractor. So you kind of have to understand how this works.
Yeah.
You'd be a
Yeah.
really crappy contractor, and Lord knows there's probably some like that out there who just have no idea what they're doing.
Right.
Um, you know, uh, don't make them like they used to, but it's yeah, it's interesting, and I also feel like the overlap, maybe. And I write about this in the last chapter of the book, and I talk about this often. But I feel like there could be a confluence of software engineering, data engineering, and ML engineering. I think is a
Yeah.
feedback loop between applications, and ML gets tighter, especially data engineering, sort of in the
Yeah.
squishy middle of things. And software engineers are just going to need to understand, at least the outputs of a ML
Right.
model, for
Yeah.
example, and how to incorporate that back into an app. And like I just feel like the feedback loop's going to get a lot tighter. Some people disagree with my assessment, but I don't know.
No,
It's what I'm
I
seeing. So
yes, no, I definitely agree. I mean, and that's the thing. That's the whole thing that I really so like my newsletter is data ops, right? It's the whole idea of operations.
yeah,
I mean, even software engineering at its core, like they came back at the agile manifesto, right? And that's like one of the key principles in there is like talk to each other.
yeah,
Like if you read through it, like that's really one of the key things that we're missing. Not just like even like that I've seen very often in what I've in the experience that I've seen. It's like they like the data team is not talking to the software engineering team or the data team like the sub teams within the data organization is not talking to each other, and like that creates like whole lot of um like a whole lot of problems that you like really like that's one of the things that I've harped really hard on. Like when I meet new people and people are joining the team, it's
yeah,
like you sit there and I'm like, hey, like this is me. Here I am. This is what I'm good at. These are my strengths. Like right, and I will literally help you if that to solve the problems that need to be solved, because otherwise we're not moving forward, right?
Yeah.
It's a team effort, and it's kind of sad, especially within like, I felt this a lot with like, and looking and seeing now with becoming like more active in LinkedIn and things like that. You see a lot of folks are like, like the data analysts and the data scientists are not talking to each other, or the data
Right.
engineers are not talking to each other, and you're like, you kind of like, this is one of the feedbacks that you need. Like, y'all are in the same team, right? Like, I can understand more so like software engineering and data teams, right? Because they're
Yeah.
sometimes it's like, hey, that's some taboo over there, right?
Well, but
Um,
I'm writing a new book on data modeling right now, and one of the core
yeah,
thesis of the book is that um, I mean, you have to view data as something that flows through a life cycle, which I think is very self-evident, but it's something that is not directly intuitive. People want to work on their sections of
yeah, right,
data and then push it on to the next person, and I think with no empathy really, and it all starts at the source, right? So when data is created,
right,
that's typically in an application of some sort, or you receive something from an API. I think it's there that hopefully developers and the people responsible for making that data are modeling it in such a way that's easy to reconcile, easy to understand, and easy to use downstream. And so that's the whole
right,
notion of it. And so it's really thinking about data in a continuum. Data engineers and data scientists and analysts are similar, where it's like, how does an analyst need to get their data, and how are they going to use it, right? So as a data engineer, if you understand that, and as a software engineer, if you understand that I think it only benefits the entire data lifecycle,
yeah,
and so forth. And I can't say this is a revolutionary concept, but it's something that I've seen that is actually a root cause of a lot of problems, with data. So it's, it's something that's been on my mind and someone writing about. So yeah.
yeah. I mean, and that's what data modeling is too. Like, think about it. It's all the stakeholders coming together, right?
Ideally,
Yeah, ideally, exactly right. Ideally, but like, it's all of the your data that an organization is using, and it's coming together and translating that into something that makes sense, so we can
hmm
produce the best result.
yeah,
Right. I think it
exactly,
also like translates into like what Chat Sanderson all talks about all the time, which is
yeah,
like, treat data like a product, because it really is
yeah.
a product. Like,
Yeah, it is a
um,
product, and we're all responsible for various aspects of creating that product, right? And there's um, and obviously, when you think about data modeling, there's the conceptual and maybe the logical models, which are somewhat distinct from how you implement it at a database or a data lake level or some sort of storage. But and obviously things will evolve as things move down the life cycle. But Chad was onto something too with data contracts. It's just the producers and consumers do need to have empathy with each other, and he's been talking about that a lot on LinkedIn. It's not simply a matter of having a contract mechanism in place that just you know
right.
checks schema changes and stuff. I mean, that's great, except you certainly don't address the root cause of why that happened.
Yeah. What
So
happens if that fails? Right.
yeah, that's interesting. Well, you've been writing a lot about data ops. I mean, what attracts you to that area?
Yeah, I mean, it's what we just mentioned too, about like, like, if we're not at the core, if we're not taking care of our, so like, okay, so maybe back up a little bit. So how I see data ops, right, is really, it's two phases. It's one, it's the culture, the data culture, talking to each other, being collaborative, realizing that we're responsible for both ourselves as well as for what others, like how others are getting the data, right? And then it's a continuous um, loop in that process. Like, we need to have continual feedback from them, because otherwise, like, our data is, we're doing everything in vain. The second part of it is really like, how can we make and improve our own processes within a data organization, within the data analyst teams, within data engineers. Which data engineering is one of the main parts that like will really help establish that, because like, if the data engineers don't have good best practices about their software, then it kind of crumbles. The rest of the team just crumbles.
Hmm.
It's really important. And so those are the two things that I really like wanted to focus on, and something I didn't necessarily um, see being written about, right?
Hmm.
And like, I like, just like you, I'm not necessarily recovering like data scientist, but every time, so like I graduated in 2017 with my graduate degree, right? And I was doing data science, and back then it was like a whole big thing, like, hey, like data science is going to be a big thing, like you should be a data
Right.
scientist, right? It's around all of that when a big wave came out, and I was like, okay, like I'm gonna go do data science, and like sooner than later, I realized if you don't have anything infrastructure, if you don't have like good processes, if you don't like, there's just like so much more time you're like wasting on that is not related to the data that you're looking at, right? So there's just so much more time. And so like really like now that I have like I've been on the data platform team for the last year, and before then I did a lot of like data science, but really was like set up infrastructure and things like that. I'm really like trying to like tell folks like, hey, my experience is that it sucks if you don't do this. Like it's better for
Yeah.
you as a whole, right? Like I remember having to do like, like there was a I had set up some simple CID. So like, we have a staging environment, we have a testing we have a staging environment and we have a production environment. And even then there was like I didn't have unit tests in place, and the amount of like it took us end up taking us like several weeks for like just me and like a bunch of like software engineers, who most of them were seniors like and above, like figuring out
Mm.
what was going on. And it ended up being like a problem in the it actually ended up being a multifaceted problem, like it always
Interesting.
is. But, I had speed up the process a lot. um, so the like part of the data pipeline, and it was overloading the database, and I didn't realize like we didn't have any alarming set up on the database, and so I didn't realize this was
Oh,
happening like 2 months after after this problem, right? And so like if you start having this like if you have those best practices or like alarms testing and things in place, it will more than likely catch it sooner rather than later. Like we
yeah.
didn't catch it until a customer started coming to us and was like, hey, like this is what is going on here, right? And
That's
that's
not the
like,
monitoring you want.
yes, exactly. And even if it's like, and even if like, I mean, obviously, you prefer to catch it like the preference is no like internal. You have internal and external customers, right? External customers is like the last thing you want to do. But if internal customers know, like, hey, there's something going on here, like we can. It's easier to do it that way than having to advertise to the to the your customer. Hey, like everything is breaking down and falling apart. We're working on it. We've been working on it. I promise. But also, we don't know what's going on. Right? And then this is
Well,
like you have teams on it,
it,
and yeah, yeah,
yeah, no, it's a big thing, right? And so the some of the things I've been writing about and thinking about, not publicly, but well, I guess now, there's different types of debt, right? So you got technical debt, obviously, which unit testing would certainly help with, and shore that up. And there's data debt. If your data keeps degrading over time, that has a problem. But there's also organizational debt, right? And this takes a form of like social and political capital within your organization and even outside
yeah,
of it, right? And so, and that debt is sometimes the hardest to pay down because when you're starting out as a data team, you're granted a certain amount of trust, and you have kind of a punch pass of mistakes that you can make. And based on the severity, you may get extra punches, but it's not like people are infinitely patient. And so
of course.
if you keep running through, this capital you've built and go into the debt, area of of that capital, and you've overspent it, this poses gigantic problems for you because now you still have the tech and you still have the data debt to deal with, but now you have a bunch of people that can't trust you because you haven't delivered something worth trusting, and that is very difficult to recover from.
And that's where also the whole idea of data ops comes in play, right? Because data ops, or at least like the understanding of it, is that you're making smaller changes and getting feedback
Yeah,
quicker, right? And that's also the best way how you earn your that trust back, right? That you're like like especially like, I mean, unfortunately, I don't know exactly the reasoning for this that happens, but data like leadership has a lot of quick, like a lot of turnover. And I don't know if that's necessarily like a tech or just specific to data, right? But I've just noticed that there's just very much a lot of quick turnover. And so what do you do, right, when you're sitting there and you're new, like you have new leadership and there's a whole bunch of tech debt that you're trying to trying to build, like sorry, that you're trying to remove, but also the whole organizational debt, right? Because your former usually leaves you with a whole bunch of organizational debt.
Well, yeah.
um, and I mean, this is a question I pose to you because I don't have that, I don't have
Well, I don't
the.
know. I mean, it's tricky, and normally when somebody leaves and you're taking over, it's not like you want to say, "Oh, that person was awesome." I mean, not human nature is you want to find some sort of fault, like, "Oh yeah, that person sucked really badly, and look at all this giant mess they left me. What am I ever going to do about this?" So I think it depends on like the how much how big is that crater that was left for you to figure out, right? So and it depends because it's so there's a person who hired you, right? And then that's the person who I think is trusting you to fix the situation. But then there's all the other people on the periphery who are kind of looking at the situation, just like, what the hell is this? Like data sucks, right? I've seen this happen many, many times, countless times. I think there's a general skepticism of data and what it can do, and many companies still to this day, right? Because it's data is still a relatively immature field relative
Yeah.
to stuff even like software engineering, and it's just and so you talk about turnover of leadership positions. I think the average chief data officer, for example, it's maybe a year and a half, 2 years, if even that. That's not great.
That's also with ICs too. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I
individual
see.
contributors like ours. It's yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it happens a lot. Again, I can't say I have answers, and it's also it's your
right.
conversation for the podcast, but I feel like the answer to this is, um, exactly what we were talking about earlier. I think you just need to have a certain level of empathy up and downstream, and make sure you're satisfying your stakeholders. It's just that easy, but just that hard. Because as engineers, the tendency is we want to engineer things, and that also, typically takes the form of being in your own silo and ignoring things. But just given the success or failure rate of data teams, I'd say it's a lot of it's pretty mixed. Um, get out and talk to stakeholders. Figure out what they want and try and make them happy that way. I don't know. So what
And
do you
that
think?
brings us all the way, yeah, and that brings us all the way back to this book because that's basically what Ben Wilson talks about in the first part.
Mm,
He's like, sorry, I'm referring to the machine learning engineering action book,
yeah.
and that's basically the first part. He talks about like what is the problem that you're actually trying to solve, and like
Hmm.
how can like because the beginning of it should be you should be designing first before you should be getting into the code.
Oh yeah.
Um, and that is actually a principle that I learned a lot from the software engineers that I worked with very closely at some of my previous companies because they're just that's something that often gets drilled into them that doesn't get drilled into the folks who are
Sure.
who focus is in the data. So
Oh yeah, and Ben Wilson too. I mean, I was on his podcast and we've chatted, and he's been around the block a bit, right? So you don't write things like what he wrote unless you've been around the block, and I think I've
yeah,
experienced these things firsthand. And just understand the value of
of making
it.
mistakes and falling really hard and hitting the wall.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, you got to do that, and you got to see other people do that, and it's kind of a scared straight program where you're just like, yeah, I'm not going to, scared straight. So it used to be the show where they would take kids to jail and prison. These are pretty bad kids, and hopefully the idea is to scare them into not living a life of crime. But the same thing happens with data. You see enough people fail, catastrophically sometimes, and hopefully, you don't want to go that way. Maybe you do. I don't know. Live dangerously. But it's it's your job, not mine. So
yeah, and I mean that's something he talks about in here too about like what it's like to be different. It's this book is just it's great and just exactly for the reasons that you're describing there. It literally it comes from experience, right?
hmm.
And I hope to gain a lot more, um, but hopefully not as maybe a little bit more guided.
Well, yeah, it's there's an old quote by Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's business partner. It's like I think it's like all I want to know is where I'll die, so I won't go there. Um, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, so bring it back to content. I mean, so you do courses. Maybe
Yeah.
walk the audience through the process of making a course, and why do you like to make courses in general? Like, what's the
Um,
motivation?
yeah, I mean, I really like court. So I love learning. That's been something that I've been doing. Like, even I mean, it's unfortunate how education a lot in America. I'm not going to talk really that extensively about it, but having been from the Netherlands and having been here, I've seen what it's like to be in another education system, right? And like trying to see and figure out what it is. And a lot of people get scared off by doing courses, like and receiving that, like that grade or whatever. And so what I truly intend to do with my courses is just trying to explain concepts that people need to know, and that that they can do the skills that need to be done. And specifically, I actually have both data engineering and machine learning engineering.
Oh, cool.
um, and but really, like, just getting a grasp on the concepts that they need to know, so that they can do their job more efficiently, right? And that's also like, so my two courses are actually machine learning foundations, which is very much focused, or actually I have three. I'll get to the third one in a second, but the first one is machine learning foundations, and that's really like, I am a data engineer trying to understand what is going on in a machine learning engineer's mind. So like, it's not like heavy on, there's some math, but it's not very heavy on math. Like, that's not the
Hmm.
goal of it. It's like, how can I learn about these concepts, and then how can I implement them? Like, you have some projects that we walk through, and then you can pick your own data set and then walk through, and do similar type of things. So it's really like building, and then like learning the concepts, seeing what you can do with it, and then building your own. And then the second one is practical data ops. And practical data ops is like what I see a lot. We just talked about it. Is there's some software engineering skills that are just missing from a lot of data folks, whether that is in data engineering or data science or analyst. And that course is really meant to like strengthen those skills. So, like, for example, what is unit testing? Why would we use unit testing? What is deployment? What kind of deployments, like, systems are there? How do I build out a Docker file? Like, some things that are just like very geared towards software engineers when you read about them online, but not necessarily like geared enough towards like, oh, I need to just understand the basics, and then I can implement it myself. Because knowing Docker files will, like, that literally changed my career. Like,
Hmm.
when they started realizing, oh, you can do containerization and you can do that, like, like, we want you on board. So that's very important to me. And then the third one is actually kind of, it was kind of like trying to figure out what I wanted to do with that, and I kind of like still have some more ideas on how to expand that. But it's a mini course. It's completely free, and it's basically like, hey, I'm a data person. I don't know what I want to do with my life yet.
Hmm.
Or like, I'm a data person. I know what I want to do with my life, or like in the next 2 or 3 years, 4 years. But I have no idea how to talk to people. like
Oh,
like
interesting.
when you're talking to career, but it's career focused, right? So you're like, how do I get jobs, like, without looking, just praying and spraying, like,
Yeah.
praying and things like that, right? And so that one's completely free. It's literally brain dump of like a lot of the stuff that I know and that I've learned over the last, I'm embarrassed to say, almost, not quite embarrassed, but it's like I've been in 6 different companies in the last 5 years. And so
That's not
that's,
terribly unusual for this industry, though, I'd say
I
so.
know. Well, most of those changes happened last year, right? So I
Hmm.
survived. Well, I don't want to. I went through 4 layoffs last year.
What?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I got laid off twice, and then I survived Swift's layoffs twice.
Jeez.
Yeah. So I let's just say I got really good at practicing those skills, and so it's kind of like figuring out, like, how can I get whatever happens in my brain, right, when like those skills.
Yeah.
And eventually I will probably expand that out too, but for now it's just really, like, really short, succinct, like, these are the things that you absolutely need to know. And so, like, so some of the snippets on there are like, you need to create a profile, like, you need to, you know share what you know, like, share what you've been doing, like, talk on LinkedIn, like, that's a really important thing. You just need to. And like, kind of like talking about like, okay, so this is a post that I did and why I did it the way that I did, or like, like here is my it actually has my resume from 5 years ago on there. And like it literally shows you don't need to have experience in the field in order to get a job in this field. And so, and eventually, like my goal is really to just provide more career support, and not necessarily just like, oh, get a job, but career support as in like all the way down the line. Um, I'm um, I have not met another senior data engineer who's a female, like in any of the
Mm.
like that I've really like in any of the companies that I've been in,
Oh,
right? And
interesting.
so yeah, and so like trying to fill, like not necessarily fill that void, but trying to be at least one of those for someone else is really important to me. And so that's kind of where all of those courses stem from.
That's really
Is that
cool.
desire to help others get through that process as well. So
That's really cool. I think it's a good service you're providing. Like I think there's sort of good books on like how to ace like certain interviews and get your but I would say even nowadays it's probably changed a bit just because the hiring market is like markedly different than it was three
yeah.
years ago, right? I mean,
Oh yeah.
it was red hot. Now I don't know what it is, but it's different.
It's red cold
So
now.
it's it is depending where you are. I think it certainly could be. I mean, I know a lot of people who have had to make other choices in their careers because the companies aren't they made other
Right.
choices too. So
And that exactly is true. I mean, so last year when I got first laid off, right? It's always the first. That was my first layoff ever
mm,
experience, and then um, it was. I mean, it was obviously I was really frightened by it. It was right before Christmas. Luckily, I still had some. Like I got some severance, and that was good. But I've also been in a layoff where I got nothing. I just got
mm,
like they told me you're done, right? And so like what do you do? What do you do then, right? And fortunately for me, I was pretty like that's one of the reasons why I started doing like technical writing, not necessarily like to get more jobs, but like to put my energy in something else that wasn't like the negative side of being job hunting and being
yeah.
it can really suck the energy out of you,
Oh yeah.
especially when you don't know how to really like. And those are the things that people like tend to not talk about it. They're like, oh, like I'm ashamed of the fact that I lost my lost my lost my job, and I'm sitting here, I'm like, well, I really need to get another job. I'm the only breadwinner in our house, right? Or things like that, right? And so
Yeah.
really just talking about, like it's it's not as important. It takes a lot of courage. I'm going to say that it takes a lot of courage. I didn't want to talk about it a lot either, like last year when everything started.
Yeah. Well, I
Um,
think back then there's a bit more of a stigma too with being laid off. I
yeah,
think now it's just like I think that's going out the window. It's just like it is what it is.
yeah, and
You
yeah,
know.
that's true. That's very true too. Yeah, and like
Yeah.
I mean, I know what it's now like to be both the survivor and like either way, it sucks. I mean, yes, you have a job when you survive a layoff, but it's still like there's so much like it's you get survivor's guilt then, which is like kind of weird to think about. Like,
Oh
why did
yeah.
I survive, right? Versus why someone else who might even like the first layoff I had that was happening at Swift was mm, I would think it was like 3 weeks into the company, like when I joined the company. And I saw people who were there, like made, like so many more contributions than I did. And, like it's tough. Like you're like, why should I be here when someone else is definitely has more to offer in this place? And they're very hard feelings. Like I can't tell you that I know everything about that either. I just know that like the little things that I learned that I want to share that
For
with
sure.
people I see, to make sure that they know that too, that and I also like I'm very I don't know if you on LinkedIn I'm very like encouraging for that reason too, because
Yeah.
I know exactly like it sucks. Either way, it sucks. Make time for yourself, and
Mhm.
I did not, and it was the worst decision that I probably like. That's one of the only things I regretted. The first time I got laid off was right before Christmas, and during Christmas, like we drove to Texas, but I was basically interviewing the entire time,
Mm.
and up to like the 2 or 3 days before Christmas, and it's just, and even then, like you not knowing that you have a job, it puts a lot of stress on you.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah, it certainly does. And, and it's good that you're doing this. I mean, and the thing is, I think you're leading by example for the right ways to make yourself more visible in a I would say a very challenging job market right now, which is, get your
yeah,
name out there, right? And make content. And your biggest enemy when you don't, especially when you're new, I feel really bad for people who are, exiting the schools right now, trying to find work, especially in tech or data. It's like it's not the environment that you signed up for 3 4 years ago when things were great. It's you're
yeah.
you're entering somewhat of a wasteland right now.
I mean, but even then, like even 4 years ago, like people tell you, "Oh yeah, it was so hot back then," and I would like to say that there is people do say that the job market is slowing down, and a lot of it is true, but there's still jobs out there,
Well, there's
right?
jobs. You're just gonna have to
There's
adjust your expectations. Like the
yeah,
Fangs, I mean, they're cutting everybody. You're probably not going to go work at Facebook right now or Meta because,
nope.
well, it's challenging there.
But don't
But
worry, there's like 90% other companies that
that's just it.
that
There's mature
they're
companies and legacy companies, quote unquote, and just like non-tech companies that are hiring in droves. And the
yeah,
unemployment rate is still like what 3.5% or something like that. And I think for tech, it's still like 2 point something percent. It's like
yeah,
those are numbers back when I had graduated that you'd be ecstatic to have that kind of environment. I grew up in a day when like 6% unemployment was normal, right? And sometimes much higher because there were recessions and all this other
right,
stuff. But it was like, 6% unemployment, 5%. I mean, 4% was a dream, and you're entering a market where it's still good. I would just say like, set your expectations. Like again, like Meta is
right.
probably not going to hire you. That's how it is because
I
and
mean,
you
Meta
probably
is
probably
also
don't want to work there anyway right now, from what I've heard. So it's
I mean, and that's something to think about too, right? Like when you're looking at where you want to work, right? So like for me, I'm actually like I've interviewed at bigger places and I've gotten through the rounds. And I've just made an active choice not to actually work at those companies just
yeah,
because
same.
I really like the challenge of working at smaller companies. They just provide so much more impact. You learn so much more too, and you see like so many other people. Like for me, it's really annoying when someone tells me, "Oh, we have a team for that," and then you have to wait on that other team to do it.
Mm,
like, like the inaction of that all. Like I'm just sitting here. I'm like, let's go. What else can I do, right?
right. It's kind of unproductive cycles.
Um,
It's yeah. I mean, and again, I think like I said, you're leading by example. You did a good job of getting your name out there. I mean, you have a very impressive LinkedIn
yeah.
following. You're encouraging. You're
Not
doing a
intentional, by the way,
not
at all.
intentional. No, no. But it's just I don't. Mine's the same way. It's just I
Yeah,
didn't intend it. It's just I'm actually really reluctant about being public and stuff. It just I am now, and that's how it is. But you
right.
know, but it's
I
just one
mean,
of those
it
things.
happens when you write a great book. Just so you should know.
Oh, thank you. Well, I mean, writing a book changes a lot of things for you too. And I would say,
Yeah,
for people who want to get their name out there, it's like, do things, make courses, make videos, write a book if you are clinically insane and want to do that to yourself. I think it's a good exercise. But the thing is, it's weird because what happens is as you do these things, right? Even if it's just
right.
writing regularly on, your blog, whatever, is you start establishing authority and expertise,
Yeah,
and that's what's going to sort of
and
make you more valuable to other people, surprisingly enough. So
and that's true too. Like I didn't realize that. So when I started out, I didn't have anybody really like not like for like I didn't really have anybody saying, "Hey, like you should do this, right? Because you should do this." And it didn't really make sense to me either. It wasn't until like I started realizing that I had a passion for writing that I actually started
right,
writing. And sometimes like that's really what life is about. Like start somewhere, do something, right? And whether that is a podcast or whether that's YouTube videos. I mean, we talk about how hard of work is to make YouTube videos, but some people
If
really
you
enjoy
like
it.
it, then do it. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And that's seriously like getting yourself out there and, you know, getting feedback from folks. Because like, for example, like the only reason why I started doing writing courses or doing anything podcasting is because people started realizing, hey, like I didn't really think that I had anything good to say, to be honest, and other people were like, no, like I really like your content, and this is really great and really helps me in, you know. And whenever you get those messages, those are always the best messages too. So if anybody out there is thinking about writing to someone saying that something was meaningful to you, please do it, because again, really, like, especially when we get, because we're just like everyone else, we get burned out too, with creating content and things like that, and you know, hearing it from other folks and being like, hey, like your content is actually helping us a lot, even if it, like, especially when it's like free, like not when there's nothing else really to it to but I mean, that's the bottom line. Like my opinion of a lot of this has changed over the last year, and I've met some great people too, just like you, like literally you. Right? This is how
Thank
I.
you.
This is how I. This is how I met you too. In chats and just and Dale and a whole bunch. I mean, I couldn't have, like, last year. I was so. It was really like a dire situation. Like it really this entire year has been a great whirlwind.
You know,
So, yeah.
life's got its ups, life's got its downs, and you know, and hopefully, you know, it's interesting. Everything just kind of goes in a cycle, you know, and
Yeah.
you know,
Right.
so when it's going good, you know, definitely enjoy it, and you know, but yeah, it's cool, and the work you're doing with the, you know, data quality, you know, community and camp and stuff is awesome. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
cool to see a part of that. Awesome. So for people who want to learn more about you, how can they do that?
Most likely follow me on LinkedIn. I also have all my courses are on DutchEngineer.org, and I imagine that the links will be somewhere below in this if it's this podcast. So DutchEngineer.org/courses, and there'll be the three will be available there. You can look at them. And then my newsletter is newsletter.dutchengineer.org. So that's pretty straightforward. And yeah, and then I'm starting the new podcast that I was talking about. I did the introduction episode 2 weeks ago, and this week, so the week of April 12th, will be the new one.
Nice.
I will be talking with Andreas Martin, and he will talking a little bit more about data science and what it looks like from his side, data science and data engineering. And yeah, so like, just I also do Twitter. Not as it's up in the air right now a little bit. I do like the content there because it's a lot more. What do you call it? Like, I guess freeing, if that makes sense. Like, you know, I don't know exactly, but you can follow me there. Anything really, if you find Dutch engineer or a Dutch engineer, you should be able to find me. So
it's cool. Awesome. Well, yeah, I had a great conversation. Yeah, thanks for being on the show, and so I guess we'll see you back on Slack. So
yeah. I'll keep hiding, don't worry.
no worries. Awesome. Well, thanks, Sarah. Great chat.
Thank you.
All right, take care. Bye.
Okay.